Sustainability is a triangle. It's not just about being good for the planet, and it's not just coming up with market-based solutions to be good to the planet. It's also about people and how to be equitable to everyone involved, whether the everyone is people or plants. And so equity, economy, and ecology was the triangle of sustainability that I first learned. And what does that really mean? That was how I first came into sustainability. When it comes to ecology, we're all pretty clear from the environmental movement what being ecologically sustainable looks like. You're stewards of the earth. You're making sure that you don't take out more than you put in, creating closed loop systems and things of that nature. And when it comes to food, it's making sure that your agricultural practices are actually benefiting the earth and not taking more out of the planet than we're putting back in. When it comes to the food economy, it's making sure that the way our trade practices happen in the global economy don't destroy nations' economies. It's making sure that the food economies are actually feeding the countries that they're interacting with and making sure that local food economies are feeding the local communities that they're interacting with. And when it comes to equity, it's making sure that there are fair labor practices, that the people growing the food benefit from the food, all of the things that we've been talking about. But that world that I just described versus the world that we currently live in, they tend to seem really far apart for a lot of people. How many people feel that sometimes, that those two worlds are just really far apart, the world we live in and the world I just described? So there's a lot of us, right? And the thing about creating that solution and bridging what we want to exist with what does exist is that it has to be a global solution and it has to be a global conversation because we're now a global community. That's what the global economy has created. Countries are interacting now in a way they never have before. To really solve this challenge, we've got to have very sophisticated, very complex dialogues. That's what this class has been all about, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. So when you're asking your questions, really think about what you've heard, and then the steps in between what exists today and what it would take to create that truly sustainable world. And when you ask your questions, the last thing I'll say is that they should be 30 seconds. The speakers might ask you for your opinion about something, should try to stay within 30 seconds. And I'll probably be off in the corner raising my spirit fingers here at the 15-second mark so that you know, because this is probably going to be a lively discussion and we want to make sure everyone has a chance to participate, or as many as possible. All right, are we ready for this? I'm now going to bring up Michael Pollan, who will introduce our speakers.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. We really have a kind of a special opportunity tonight to learn about the food system and the possibilities of reforming it from the inside. Walmart is the largest buyer and seller of food in the United States, responsible for something like somewhere between 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of every dollar spent on food in this country. Walmart essentially feeds a third of the country, and it is the bottom third, demographically speaking, where, as we've learned in previous classes, the struggles around obesity and diabetes and access to healthy food are most acute. Now, a question that's come up several times from you guys in your questioning is what role, if any, can big corporations play in changing the food system? Michelle Obama, for one, has decided that they will play a central role in the campaign against childhood obesity, and she's partnered with Walmart. And we'll hear about that from Jack, I'm sure. But many others, and I'm sure some in this room, are skeptical that the same big companies that help to create these problems that we're dealing with can be a constructive part of the solution. They argue that the food movement should instead focus its energies on building up alternative economies, local food economies, and getting people essentially out of the supermarket. For my own part, I'm actually of two minds on this question. I think one of the most exciting things about the food movement that we've been looking at has been its success in building these alternative food chains. Whether we're talking about organic agriculture or community-supported agriculture, food co-ops, or farmers markets. Yet, as we've also discussed and been made acutely aware of, democratizing the food movement, making healthy, sustainable food accessible to everyone, especially the poor, is a challenge the movement hasn't yet met. So what should the food movement say when a big corporation comes along offering to help advance its objectives? What else could Michelle Obama have said when the industry offered to help her campaign? And then there's this unignorable fact. The upside, if there is an upside to having a highly concentrated food economy where a very small number of tremendous corporations exert tremendous power, is that when they move, everything changes. We saw this a few years ago when McDonald's, under pressure from its customers and from animal rights groups, decided it would no longer tolerate the most brutal aspects of meat packing in this country. And the way the whole industry slaughtered animals changed virtually overnight. You don't have to love McDonald's to see that engaging with them might actually produce some positive results. Tonight, we as a group get to engage with another behemoth on the food and farming landscape, Walmart. Let me explain our format really quickly. I'm going to begin by introducing Jack Sinclair and Jib Ellison. Jack and Jib will each then make a brief PowerPoint presentation, and then the three of us will engage in a conversation for about a half hour. Then we'll open it up to all of you, and as Nikki said, we'll strive for very succinct questions. I know our guests are happy, or at least willing, to take your most pointed questions, but I also hope you'll remember that they are, in fact, our guests, who by coming here this evening, without any preconditions, have made a wager that it's possible to have an open and civil exchange of views, even with those who disagree with them passionately. First, let me introduce, I'm going to introduce Jib and then Jack, but Jack's going to come up first. Jib Ellison is the founder of and CEO of Blue Skye, a consulting firm based in Northern California that works with Fortune 50 companies to transform markets and create new ones. Blue Skye's process is premised on using sustainability to reveal new market opportunities, engage senior management and employees, and leverage its network of experts to do well by doing good. Jib has been working closely with senior management at Walmart since 2005, or 2004, when the company began remaking itself to become more sustainable. Jib is also, not incidentally, a Class 5 river guide and has led whitewater rafting expeditions on 5 continents, and part of his method, in fact, involves trapping senior corporate executives on his boats. Maybe he'll tell us a little bit about this. It was Jib who actually launched my own engagement with Walmart, introducing me several years ago to various of its executives for conversations, often very challenging ones, about the environmental and public health problems of the industrial food system. And Jack Sinclair is one of those executives. And when he and Jib and I met for a very stimulating lunch a year or so ago, it occurred to me that bringing him to campus for this kind of conversation would be very worthwhile, and he graciously agreed to come. Jack has been executive vice president of the grocery division at Walmart since 2008. He has responsibility for overall grocery strategies for Walmart stores US. That makes him probably the single largest food buyer in the nation, if not the world. Jack has worked in the retail food business since 1982. He began his career as a trainee at Shoppers Paradise in the United Kingdom. He's also worked for Tesco and Safeway PLC, where he eventually served on the board of directors. He joined Walmart from McCurrock, a UK-based firm merchandising business. As will soon be evident, Jack is a Scotsman. He earned a bachelor's degree in economics and marketing from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. Jack Sinclair.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that introduction. I'm really very pleased to be here. one of the things I thought I would do at the start, I saw these little things that you've got that you can do little tests. And one of the things that I think is one of the things I was going to ask you was, what year did Berkeley first have a professor of nutrition? And you've got three choices. Was it 1969, 1979, or 1895? How quick does that come up?
Meaning that, what was the first one?
1969, 1979.
1969 is A, 1979 is B.
And 1895.
And 1895 is C.
So is there an instant answer?
Most people think 1979 with 45%.
Okay, well, most of you think 1979. The answer is 1895. So these issues have been around for a long time. And Berkeley's got a host of accomplishments to its name. And one of the things that I was surprised about was that you had a professor of nutrition in 1895. Professor Jaffe, all those years ago, was the first to know about the negative role of cholesterol and fat in people's diets. In 1955, your professor, John Goffman, identified the role of LDL and HDL in heart disease and really started to understand the difference between good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So what better place for me to be here today to think about the challenges that face the food industry? There are some fundamental challenges of obesity, hunger, and feeding a growing population. And I'm delighted to be here and share the conversations that you've been having over the last few weeks. You've had some very distinguished people here, and I'm delighted and honoured to be part of the panel that have come along to speak to you. And very much part of what I want to do today is listen to what you've got to say. And very much the dialogue that we have to have is something that Walmart has been embarked upon since 2005, and much of the impetus to that came with Jib Ellison and his impact on many of the people within Walmart. And that initiative has been started as much as anything else by engaging in dialogue with non-government NGOs, government departments, people that maybe don't immediately agree with everything that Walmart or everything that Walmart might stand for. So we're very pleased to be here and very pleased to engage in a dialogue with you, and I hope we have a very stimulating evening. So let me just see if I can make this work. 1962, Sam Walton opened the very first Walmart store in Bentonville, Arkansas, in Rogers, Arkansas. And it's quite remarkable, really, in 50 years, that business, based on a very simple philosophy of bringing low prices to as many people as he could, has transformed the retail landscape, not just in the United States, but across the world. As we look at the map of the world today, Walmart's global presence, we're in 28 countries now, 9,700 retail units, $419 billion in sales, more than 200 million customer transactions weekly. But remember, this started from one little store in Rogers, Arkansas. This started as a very small business with a passion and a vision to help people save money so that they could live better. And it's a vision that we share, and we share as a team. I've got many of my colleagues here with me today. It's a vision that we share as a team. We passionately believe that the business model that we have helps people save money so that they can live their lives better. And part of that responsibility that comes with being such a large company and such a big behemoth as Michael described us as, is that we have an opportunity and a responsibility to take our role in food and wider than that very seriously. So we've put some very clear sustainability goals together in 2005, and these are goals that we've been working on since that time. So we want to be supplied 100% by renewable energy. We want to create zero waste, and we want to sell products that sustain people and the environment. Those aspirational goals are at the heart of Walmart's efforts, and we do back them up with measurable initiatives. We're an organization that when we make statements, we put numbers against those statements and hold ourselves accountable to delivering against those numbers. The next logical step in that sustainability journey that we've been on was to think about agriculture. And I know that's very much the topic that you've been debating over the last few weeks at these classes. And our sustainable agriculture commitments that we announced some time ago in the last year or so are based on three fundamental pillars. The pillar of supporting farmers and their communities. We want to produce food with fewer resources and less waste. And we want to sustainably source the key agricultural products. And in particular, we've done some work on palm oil, beef from Brazil, and in seafood. And there's more to do in that space for us. And now, just going through those individual ones for a moment. Supporting farmers in the community, what does that look like? We believe in local sourcing. We believe local farmers. Customers would prefer to have something that's been produced locally, that's fresher, takes less food miles to get to them, and that's what they would, if you've got a first choice, they would prefer to buy local produce. And many of the work that we've done with our local initiative starts with a local supplier supplying a few stores. Then they go to, we've got 42, I'm talking the US food business, we've got 42 distribution centres. So a supplier that's doing well and growing then goes to our distribution centre, might serve one distribution centre. Then as that evolves, it could be 3, 4 and become a regional programme. And then it could become a national programme. And if you think about the commodities that we're operating in, some of them make are inevitably local. Blueberries in Michigan, when they're in season, are as good blueberries as you could eat anywhere in the world, but the problem is it's only for that limited window. And customers in Michigan want to buy blueberries outside of that window. And the challenge for us, and the challenge for understanding the sustainability of that is, does it make sense for us to import blueberries from Chile? We do that, out of season. Customers love it. We give it at a great price. But what's the environmental impact of that? And that's some of the measurements that we want to put on that to understand that going forward. But we fundamentally believe that local leading to regional, leading to national, within the seasonal constraints of produce is an important part of our business going forward. We work with farmers to try and offer technical assistance. We try and increase farmer income in a number, and I'll give you some examples of that, and very much believe in energising the local economies around the stores that we service. And we have a vested interest in the local economies around the stores that we service being successful, in that it builds the local economy and works for our stores. So let me just flick on to some other slides. In terms of energy, we very specifically, as I said, we've got targets. We've committed to doubling the sourcing, the local source of our produce to 9% of all produce. And we've got a number of initiatives across the country. The I-95 corridor in the East Coast, we've been developing a lot of truck veg products to change the need to have products sourced from California, shipped all the way across the country to the East Coast. We've been working very hard in Arkansas and the Mississippi River Delta to reintroduce crops as the tobacco industry goes. But how can we reintroduce crops that were native to those regions? And I've actually been switched to Washington and California over years. We're working very hard at that. And we're also, Sam's Clubs have made some very specific commitments around fair trade and Rainforest Alliance as well. And on fish, seafood, something that worries us a lot in terms of the sustainability of seafood. And it's something that we're working a plan together, and it's June 2012 will be there, where all fresh and frozen, farmed and wild seafood suppliers have submitted to a third-party certification that ensures the sustainability in everything in the seafood that they're selling to Walmart. And that's been a challenging issue for us, and it's something we're working our way through, and we're hoping we will get there by June 2012. The local farm, one of the initiatives that we've done is jalapenos, chili peppers, and tomatillos. They were very big. We were getting big demand for them, and a lot of the growers in the corridor, the Mississippi River Delta corridor that I was talking about, weren't producing these products. We've been encouraging the farmers to start producing these products. We've now got them. We were buying them from one state. We've now got them. We're now sourcing them from 30 states, supplying locally. And we're seeing, as I said, customers like fresher products because it actually tastes better when it's fresher. The prices are lower because the distribution's shorter. And we're seeing some big success in those particular commodities. Big belief in Central America, we've got a strong retail business in Central America, and it's a very important agricultural region. We're working very hard with local producers there. This is a very specific hydroponic lettuce producer who was delivering 500 units, now delivering 2,000 units, and working very hard through something called the Tierra Fertile program, which is about investing in training for farmers so that, and we'll guarantee that they'll have a source of supply for those products. And that's working well for us, both in developing communities right across Central America. Other initiatives that we're trying to do is producing more food with fewer resources and less waste. How can we use the full crop? It's quite astonishing the number of apples in the Washington state that lie on the ground and are not used having been produced. And one of the initiatives we've taken is how do we take that apple production and turn it into concentrate apple juice for our apple juice production. And that's something that has been getting imported from China. We've now converted all of our private label apple juice using apples that were getting thrown away. And we think that's an opportunity we've got in a number of markets to make sure that product is not thrown away. One of the challenges of produce, quite frankly, is the amount of throwaways that the industry has and the inefficiency of that industry. And so much production goes, so much resource and effort goes into producing product, and then a lot of it isn't used. The throwaway ratios in the United States are pretty high relative to some other markets. Michael made reference to our announcement with the First Lady, and we were very proud to work with the First Lady on this initiative. We do believe that there are things that Walmart can do and can lead to make a difference in the industry. And when we spoke to the First Lady about this initiative, there was some real, her Let's Move initiative, which isn't just about food, it's also about getting more spaces for children to have exercise and a number of other key initiatives around food deserts. We saw a real parallel in the work that we were doing with our major vendors to say, what are the key initiatives? When it comes to nutrition, I heard you mentioning that you had Marion Nestle here. We invited about 3 years ago now, maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, a whole host of very eminent nutritionists across the country. We tried to get all the important nutritionists in one room and said to them, what do you think we should do about the challenges of nutrition? And what they talked to us about was sodium. They talked to us about fats and sugar and fat, and trans fats. And those were the three things that we then took forward and made an initiative on. And we've made some very specific commitments on the reduction of sodium in the products that we sell and the reduction of sugars. And we've guaranteed to eliminate all trans fats in our products. We also want to make healthier food more affordable. One of the challenges for our customers, and we do operate with our average customer income is well below $25,000 and below. And they really are struggling to look after their families. And we have to get a place where if they want to make healthy choices, how do we make it easier for them to make healthier choices? And we're going to put some labeling together to make that easier. And how do we make it affordable? So why should it be that the low-sodium version of soup is 10, 15% more expensive than the standard version? Why should it be that the low-fat version should be more expensive than the standard fat version? And we can work with our vendors, we can utilize our scale to make a difference in that. And we're making some very specific work on that. And I think the last point on that little slide there, helping educate consumers about healthier food choices is very, very important. I think the lack of connection from consumers to food is one of the things that's leaving us in a place where people don't understand the challenge, what food really is, how to cook food and how to connect with food. We had the opportunity this afternoon to go and visit the middle school, the middle school. And it was very inspiring to see a garden in a middle school and the teaching of children. And I do believe if that could spread much more dramatically across the country, you would get a natural change in the diet of the country. People would naturally start to connect with food and want to eat better food. But it's not Walmart's place to tell people what to eat. It's Walmart's place to put choice in front of people and give them the best possible price that we can using our best efforts to do that. And hunger's another big challenge for us. I think it is quite desperate to see some of the issues. As I had the opportunity of spending a day this summer with Governor Beebe in Arkansas, in some of the school districts in Little Rock, where in the summertime, when the schools are on holiday, the children are just not eating any meal at all, because school is the only option where they're going to get meal, and we're helping with some charitable work with some other people on that to try and stimulate the whole summer season and make sure people are getting that opportunity to have a healthy meal. It's quite desperate to see the challenges that we face, and again, through the Walmart Foundation, we can make a big impact on hunger in America, and we intend to do so. This is a little article I saw last weekend in the New York Times, and I thought I'd just quickly put it up here because I think it highlights some of the issues that I think we need to talk about. I don't really want to talk about the McDonald's issue, but chicken, potatoes, and salad for $4, $13.78. Pinto beans and rice for $4, $9.26. I went to do that shop at Walmart last week to just see what it would cost us, and it's $10.13 at Walmart. And for the one on the chicken, potatoes, and salad for $4, it's $6.52 for the pinto beans and rice for $4. I then did the same shop in Walmart for organic, and we sell all of these products organically. We're a very large seller of organic food. We sell all of these products organically. The price for organic food, 20 on the left, the one that's $13.78, and then $10.13, $20.14 for organic, chicken, milk, the same thing. And the $9.26, which in Walmart's $6.52, becomes $13 when you sell it organic in Walmart. Our organic prices are the best in the marketplace. And our customers can't afford to buy organic. And I want them to be able to afford to buy organic, but they can't afford to buy organic. And one of the dialogues that we want to have with the industry and all of you is, how can we engineer a situation where the organic prices are within the reach of average American consumers? Now, there's challenges to the organic movement. The certification process costs a lot of money. We were at a pistachio farm this morning looking at a wonderful farm, great investment, solar technology, utilizing utilizing the land really effectively and regenerating the land effectively. But not organic production. And when you ask why not organic production, well, the certification process is really difficult. It's a really complicated certification process. The problems of segregation in the factory and trying to clean it up and set the challenges of that, the costs associated with that, the costs associated with distribution. And so all of these things we think Walmart, we can play a role in. If we can play a role to bring our scale to bear, to drive efficiency, we think we can bring healthier, better food to more Americans at much better prices. So there's a number of people that are beginning to, I think, we're getting some credit from some people that you might normally expect us to get credit from. And I think we are doing some important work in this whole sustainability space. We want to always put the customer at the center of our decision making. The customer decides what she wants to buy. We don't decide what she wants to buy. And we can play the role of using our scale to try and bring prices as low as they can within an efficient distribution network. We have to have a sustainable supply chain for us to be successful going forward. So when I talk about price, it's not about taking prices down so that we can bash the supply chain and squeeze the margins of everybody. We want people's margins to go up. We want everybody in the chain to be more successful. We need farmers to be more successful. We need processors to be more successful. And we need the retail prices for our customers to be as low as they possibly can be. Our scale can play a role in making that come alive. And that's the greatest power in our business. And when we talk about sustainability, we don't see a huge challenge or a huge dilemma between the objectives of sustainability and the objectives of doing well as a business, because we really do believe that we can do really well by doing the right things and being part of the agenda that improves the food and the livelihoods of the people producing food right across the country. So that was what I wanted to share with you today, and I really appreciate your attention. And I think I'd like to now introduce Jib Ellison.
Thank you, Jib.
I didn't know if I was meant to do that.
Hi, everybody. So,
Do you want the presenter tools? Do you want the presenter tools?
what's
Just
it?
the slideshow. Just the slideshow.
Slideshow.
There you go.
There we go. And just press on this? Yeah, okay. So, thanks, Jack, and thank you, Michael, for inviting me to be here, and thank you all for being here. What I want to build upon very quickly is an example that speaks to what Jack just said. If organic food is better, stand here. All right. If organic food really is better for the planet and for people, it should be cheaper. Because if it's better, or let's just put it the other way, if conventional food is lowest cost because it is externalizing costs into the environment and into the social system that someone else has to pay for, it is not actually low cost. It's high cost. And in the work that I and my colleagues at Blue Skye have been doing over the past 7 years with Walmart and other big companies, we've come to the realization that for sustainability on Earth to work, you're going to have to figure out how to get the lowest price products to be the best, have the best environmental and social profile. Because there are a lot of people who are very, very price sensitive in this world, will always dominate the commodity markets. So I want to give you one example, a recent example that I learned of, and on an innovation. And what's going to be required is a number of things, but in the short term, it's innovation. And so I just want to give you, I think, one of my favorite examples. So it all starts with a person. Much like Alice Waters, who was a person of passion and vision and really made a huge difference, even to the point that we're here tonight, I understand, right? This guy, Dale Lewis, is an elephant biologist, and he's lived in northern Zambia for 30 years. His passion is elephants. And while he was living there over these years, he watched the elephants population go into severe decline due to poaching. He did everything he knew how to do to stop the poaching, until one day the poachers got so upset they actually came to shoot him in his house, he and his wife. He escaped. They got caught, 4 of them, thrown in prison in northern Zambia, not a very nice place. He went to confront them. And when he went to confront them, he noted that they were starving to death. The clothes, as he described them to us, were just hanging off their bodies. And he realized that all his efforts to stop the poaching were going to be futile because these people were starving to death. And because they were starving to death, they were going to do anything they needed to do, including kill the last elephant to feed their families. So he changed his entire orientation and started an organization called Kamako, which maybe some of you have heard of. So basically, what he does is he goes to the chiefs of the tribes that live around this park, Northern Luangwa Park, and he cuts a deal. And he says, chiefs, and then he goes on to tell me who the poachers are, and I'm going to go talk to the poachers. And if the poachers agree to give us their snares, give us their guns, and agree never to do this again, I'm going to teach them how to farm. And so he did that. He brought in people from the Lusaka, the Agricultural Institute, moved them out there, and they started teaching these poachers to farm so that they would be food secure. And the promise was, we're not going to have to go poach because we're now going to have food. Then they had food surplus. So in addition to supporting them in the farming with the resources and supplies, he guaranteed the surplus, the purchase of all surplus food, which led to a chain of events. Then they set up a processing plant. This is 15 hours drive from basically the nearest big city, the city of Lusaka. And he started this brand called It's Wild, and these are the products here. And then they bring them to market, and here's the amazing thing. So the results over the last 8 years or so are outstanding. and I won't read them here, you can look at it, but fundamentally what he was trying to do, which is save the elephants, has really worked by helping all the people rise up out of poverty by learning how to farm and creating this system. So here's what really attracted me. He's done all this in such a way that when these products, which are, we saw the whole thing. We met the poachers, we saw the farms, we saw the processing plants, we saw all the way back to the retailers in Lusaka. They are the cheapest product on the shelf. They are practically biodynamic. They're organic for sure. There's no fossil fuel inputs going into these products at all in their growth. They're super high quality, and they're the cheapest ones on the shelf. And they're selling like hotcakes, and this is a profitable venture. And so this is an innovation that in the 21st century, in my opinion, and as we get into this conversation, is indicative of what we must figure out how to find, replicate, and scale if we're to have a profitable and sustainable food system. So, and these are some of the organizations that are being helpful to this whole project, including the Haas School. They sent some people out there to help him with his business plans a few years ago. So.
Thank you both for those presentations. It was very helpful. You touched on a lot of the issues I wanted to get into, and I was going to get into them gradually, but I don't think I will. Price is a really big issue here. I mean, and one of the themes of our class has been what we keep calling the high cost of cheap food. And that the price at the register, as you've written about in that Harvard Business Review piece that was assigned reading, doesn't really include the cost of making the food. And especially true, meat is a great example, right? We have very, very cheap meat because we've externalized certain costs. Ranchers and feedlot operators have to use a lot of pharmaceuticals, basically, to keep the prices down. I had a kind of epiphany in a Walmart about this, actually, a few years ago. And it was a very kind of disturbing moment for me. I was in Garden City, Kansas. I was writing about the feedlot business and slaughter business. It's kind of the capital of feedlots in America. Lots of undocumented workers in the slaughterhouses and on the feedlots. And I went into into Walmart late at night. It was open very, very late. Well, there's often a McDonald's in Walmart. And I went to the meat counter to see what they were selling in the town where all this meat was being produced. And they were selling a kind of meat I had never seen in my market. It was something, I think it was called Select. And it was a kind of beef that was made by injecting saline solution to tenderize it. We talked about this a little bit at lunch last year. And there were the people I'd seen at the slaughterhouse. And this was the meat they could afford to buy. And I sort of saw this whole kind of non-virtuous cycle of low wages and low prices. And you talked about the fact that a lot of your customers can't afford anything else. And we're sort of trapped in this circle, though, because if you talk to most people in the meat industry and say, well, what about getting rid of antibiotics? What about getting rid of hormones in beef, which both of them speed growth and keep the animals alive under these conditions? You know all about this. And they say, well, it'll be too expensive. We can't afford whatever the extra pennies are. So to the extent we are externalizing these costs in order to feed people who can't afford more, how do we break out of that circle?
Well, we talked about this last year a lot, Mike, and I think it's quite a complex issue. If you think about the program, my mother after the war in United Kingdom didn't get access to meat. There was no meat for them you couldn't not even get it on the ration book. There was rationing of butter, rationing of eggs. So it's quite remarkable when I go home, and it's a rare treat to get any red meat, and it's still seen as that 50 years later. So the meat industry has done a pretty remarkable job, And I think I'll talk a little bit more about what you said. Pretty remarkable job at bringing access to poor people of food that they wouldn't have got access to. And that was stimulated post-World War II in an era of extreme shortage. And a lot of government policy was about trying to get volume and start producing higher volumes of food. So when you run it forward now, one of the challenges of the meat industry in the United States has been, and it relates to the saline solution, is distribution in the US is one of the challenging things. It takes a long time to get things. So preservatives, one of the reasons sodium's quite a big part of the US, bigger part of the US diet, is just the amount of preservatives that's in that and as it moves forward. So we think there's some, again, if we can invest, this is what Walmart's solution to the meat challenge will be, is how do we invest in better facilities so that we don't have to inject, so that we can, we're in the process of changing that whole thing that you saw in Kansas, Michael. By the end of this month, we'll be out of all of that saline solution. Because one of the things I'm very clear about is it's not enough for us to give people cheap food. We have to give people good food. And everybody deserves good food. And it's not enough, and we are committed to making sure that wherever the customers are on the income ladder, that we give them a choice, but it's a good choice at whatever level that's in it. Now, some of the challenges of antibiotics and some of the challenges, I think, are more complex, and I think we'll have to, solutions to that don't lead to huge hikes in price are the solutions for us, because I think that's where you'll create better local economies and stronger local economies. And I think within the meat industry, we'd be keen to understand tiers of more grass-fed. Is there opportunities to do that? And are there tiers where there's different ways so that customers can choose? We want customers to make a choice within a ladder, really, of good, better, best. But whether it be good, better, or best, the customer deserves a quality and standard that is not just about cheap food, is really the point I want to make.
Jib, you want to add anything to that? You wrote a lot about, we need to put a price on things like pollination services of bees, right? $200 billion a year. Antibiotic resistance seems to me a good one to put a price on. We're losing good antibiotics to the meat industry. How do you...
And making people sick, potentially,
and potentially,
which has
right,
a cost.
which is a huge cost.
Right.
And you said that one of the keys to sustainability is no longer being able to externalize those prices. But how do you do that? Who enforces that price? You're talking about a radically new economics, because Jack's dealing with a customer who can't afford to pay more, and he's also dealing with shareholders who don't want to see profits shrink. So do you need the government to stand behind that?
Ultimately, yes. I think here's the interesting thing. My friend Yvon Chouinard, who co-wrote the article, said he's never made a decision in his business.
Tell people who he is.
Yvon Chouinard is the founder of Patagonia. It's a clothing company, an outdoor clothing company. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but it's something, I've never made a decision for sustainability innovation that didn't actually return profitably, even when it looked like it wasn't going to. And my enduring experience, and I think our enduring experience, and I would say even within Walmart, which is very much focused on cost, 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 it's everyday low cost, everyday low price, is when you use a sustainability lens, let's just call it, innovations occur that perhaps didn't seem possible before. So the example I gave is just one example. There's many, many examples. So in the near term, I think I would propose that there is a bit of a myth that we are not clever enough to innovate value chains such that high-quality food can be brought to markets at lower cost. So that's step one. Ultimately, however, when you're dealing with commodity-based, cotton or wheat or corn, I believe ultimately there will need to be prices set and rules and regulations that acknowledge the true cost of doing these things, and that will be the point at which there is a tipping point.
Well, one of the things you've done a lot of work on is reducing the carbon footprint of your food chain, and in fact the companies in general has worked very hard on reducing carbon. But I wonder, wouldn't that be easier if there were a national price of carbon? I mean, had that been set? What I'm getting at is going about these issues on your own. One company, albeit a very powerful company, you may put yourself at a disadvantage to go first.
I think in lots of these issues, it isn't about one company. Lots of these issues, and if you think of the indexes that we're trying to put together, the sustainability indexes, we wouldn't see that as a competitive issue, and we would want the whole industry to embrace, and we'll embrace the industry, thinking through how we can measure these things. One of the things in agriculture that I'm sure you've talked about is how do we deal with water, which is one of the big challenges going forward, and soil. How do we, as we look at our agricultural sustainable indexes, we're really trying to understand what are the values you can put on those things, and how can we take a common view of that. And I think you're right, Michael, that's not going to be Walmart on its own that does that. That's going to have to be some industry, and probably working with government agencies to make this make some sense. I know you've done some work on this, but we don't see this as something that if we have to lead and lead and people will follow us, that would be something that we'd be prepared to do. But we would want to see it being an industry solution to a lot of these issues about carbon, water, soils, things like that.
And to that point, the first step would be if Walmart, working with its value chain partners, working with NGOs, working with the government, can align around what is a better practice than another practice in an agricultural system without a price. That will do a lot in and of itself.
Without a price?
Without saying that this is, the cost of this cup ultimately is $5. It costs me $1, but it's $5. And this cup costs me $1, but it's actually a $20 cup. I mean, ultimately, I think there's a true cost equation in there. Right. But at first, if you could just say that this one was made with less harm than this cup, that will do a lot as the buyers and the people who are working to cook and use food are doing their development work, because they're going to be asking, because we live in a time when people are becoming more aware of these things. They're going to want the cup that does less harm. Just the same way Jack wants to serve good, healthy food at a low cost that competes with the food and make that choice available to people, which, there's food deserts. You guys have probably learned all about this. It's not easy for a lot of people in this country to get good food.
Yeah, and that's been one of your initiatives that we should talk a little bit about. It's been a controversial one. Some people see the effort. Walmart has basically proposed a new kind of smaller store, is that right? To come into food deserts. And there's a reason that there are not a lot of supermarkets in these places, I assume, an economic reason. I'm curious to know why you think you can solve that problem that other supermarkets may have had.
Well, I don't know if it is I don't know if there has been economic problems on that. We've got two formats that we think potentially can have a big impact on reducing settings in both urban settings and in rural America. There's vast millions of Americans who do not get access to fresh fruit and vegetables, and it's no more complicated than that. I think one of the challenges of that is, you're asking why has that not been provided before. Walmart certainly has. We've been focusing in on large stores as the growth of our business over the last 50 years or so. Effectively, how do we bring that fresh foods? We're going to have to do it in a smaller format, simply because that's all that's going to be available. We've opened a store in Chicago. We've got 4 stores we're testing in Arkansas, in rural Arkansas, and we'll see whether we can make that work. But we're pretty confident that what's certainly true is if you walk around Chicago and try and buy fresh fruit and vegetables, you can't do it. And I hope we think we can play a role in doing something about that.
You know what Stephen Colbert said about this initiative, right? He said it was a Trojan cantaloupe to get Walmart into cities. And many cities, of course, have fought the arrival of Walmart for various reasons. Do you any response to Stephen Colbert's?
ultimately, it won't be really about Stephen or anyone else. It'll be up to the customer to decide. And the reason Walmart has got a lot of customers is a lot of customers choose to come and shop at Walmart. No one's forcing anybody to shop at Walmart, and no one will force anyone to go and shop at Walmart in Chicago or Los Angeles or anywhere else. It'll be up to them to decide, and ultimately we'll put the offer in front of them, and we'll hope that's, from a Walmart point of view, we'll hope they'll come and shop with us.
One of the things, I want to talk a little bit about farm workers, which is something we've talked about a little bit in the class, and we're going to be visited at the end of the month by some people organizing farm workers in Florida. I was very struck by the fact that in some of your buying practices you've embraced fair trade, and that in coffee, I guess in particular, you've worked with Transfair, which is a local outfit. And so that you've defined sustainability, I mean, speaking to Nikki's point, not in a very narrow way that's only about the environment, but having other social and labor components to it. And that the welfare of farm workers matters to the company.
Absolutely.
I wonder what you're doing, if anything, domestically on that question, because this is a very big issue in California, and specifically, and I'm asking this on behalf of two of the activists who'll be here in a couple weeks, would you consider signing on to the campaign of the Coalition of Immokalee Workers in Florida? I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this is a campaign basically in one of the most brutal agricultural economies where there have been, I think, 6 prosecutions for slavery. But there's a movement to improve the conditions of those tomato pickers, give them penny a pound more per. And I wondered if this is something Walmart has considered doing, and where you are on that.
Very specifically, we have an ethical sourcing policy, and it's very important to us that all of our suppliers conform to those ethical sourcing standards. The ethical sourcing, we have a fairly large team who are responsible for ethical, and it's not just in the US, but it's across the world. It applies to the US equally to the rest of the world. And it applies to every commodity that we sell, from apparel to non-foods all the way through to our agriculture and food business. Those ethical sourcings those policies of ethical sourcing are managed outside of the merchandising team. So within Walmart, the merchandising team have to buy from those ethical. They cannot compromise any ethical standards in terms of what we source and how we source. And it's a big issue around child labour. It's a big issue around we will be accountable for all of the products that we sell in all of our stores. And that's something that we're committed to and we take very, very seriously. And any infringements that we find, which we do find, we take seriously and we deal with seriously. And we work with, in Florida, California, wherever, we work very closely with agencies who pick those issues up for us, and we take it seriously. It matters to us. It matters to the communities. Our customers expect it of us. Our communities expect it of us, and it's something we can make a big impact on. The specifics of the tomato grower, I'm not sure exactly what. I know we've been looking at it, Michael. I think they're looking for a premium, and we have been considering that. But whether the idea is to put a premium onto it, we've got a fundamental belief that we've got some ethical sourcing standards that cannot be broken, and that's our policy at the moment.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that you're considering it. I want to, before I open it up, Nikki's giving me a signal, but I do want to talk about the Healthy Foods initiative that you did with Michelle Obama. I was, frankly, very surprised that she was willing to do a photo op at the beginning of this process and not a year or two down the road after you'd actually done things. She did it on the basis of your promises, which were very, very impressive. I'm curious to know how that negotiation went. Was she a good negotiator, and did she get things out of you that you weren't planning to give?
Thankfully, I wasn't party to those negotiations, so I can sidestep that question a little bit. The work we've been doing on this healthy eating came from a lot of work we did with our customers who were saying to us, we want to eat healthy. We want to, particularly the research said, they want to look at all customers, whoever they are, wherever they live, whatever social standards, are concerned about the health of their children more than the health of themselves. And the feedback we got from our customers was, you need to do something about this, and you need to do something to make it more affordable and make it easy for us. We were working on that almost at the same time as the First Lady started to talk about her Let's Move initiative, and it came along at the same time, so that we felt there was a logical conversation to have with the First Lady, and we fundamentally believe in what she's trying to achieve there, and anything we can do to support it, we'll do so.
You talked about Marion Nestle as somebody who you brought in on this conversation, and the initiative basically is to reduce the bad nutrients in a lot of processed foods, which is probably an important thing to do, and to make fresh produce less expensive. There is a school of nutrition, though, that Marion Nestle, I think, buys into, that tweaking processed food doesn't really do that much compared to getting people off processed food and onto fresh produce. So I'm wondering what you're doing in that area to kind of nudge your customer toward making greener choices. And this goes for produce versus processed food, but it would also go for, say, instead of greening the meat supply chain, encouraging people to buy foods with less of a carbon footprint. Do you see that as your role? I mean, to encourage, as a way to... What are you doing?
I never knew this would happen when I came to
You've talked about the customer is sovereign, but one way to deal with sustainability and health is obviously to nudge people to make better choices. Do you see that as part of your job as a merchandiser?
Well, I don't think it's part of our job to try to convince people to buy something that they don't want to buy. I think, as I say, price elasticity is very, very important, and become more significant over the past year or so as the economy's got tougher. Customers are making trade-down choices at the end of the month, making different choices beginning of the month, end of the month, buying brands at the beginning of the month when they've got money, buying into private label at the end of the month when they haven't got money, trading down. And, it's difficult for us to do anything else than manage the price elasticity between different products. And ultimately, it'll be up to the customer to decide whether she wants to eat healthily or not eat healthily. And I think it is our responsibility to give the choice, to make it clear in the choice, to try to manage price differentials, as I said about those organic differences in prices. I know we would sell a lot more organic food if it was cheaper. And I think we can do that in a sustainable way for the supply chain. And that's how we would want to solve it. But what I don't think we can do anything in any other way is put those choices in front of customers and let her make those decisions.
Before I bring up Nikki, which I want to do in a minute, I have a suggestion for you on that organic certification thing. Instead of certifying organic produce or food, what if we certified chemically laden food? And that was the stuff that had to get the label. That might help a little bit. Nikki, do you want to come up and join us for the questions? I'm gonna hand my microphone over to Nikki, and she will moderate because she's much better at it than I am. You hold on to that because you're going to get questions. Should I give you the chair?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm good. All right. Question and answer. I will take the liberty of asking the first question because I helped design this course. So,
You have the mic.
you too. Thank you very much for being here. And I was jotting down some notes when you were talking, and one of the things that occurred to me, especially listening to you talk about the customer and customer choice, and listening to you talk about what is the real cost of items, one of the things that we've been discussing in this course is how we live in a country where the rules are rigged. The wealth gap has been growing. We're one of the countries that pays the least amount for our food when it comes to the percentage of our income. When it comes to first world countries, we don't pay what other first world countries pay based on percentage. And so listening to you talk about the true cost and listening to you talk about sustainability, I think one of the questions on my mind is, how do you play fair when the rules are rigged? when you're playing in an economic system that has created what it's created in terms of these kind of inequities? So that's one question. And then I think my second question,
Oh, that's just a little question.
just a short little second question, is in terms of the three pillars of sustainability, economy, ecology, and equity, liked what you said about the environment, was listening to what you said about keeping prices low for people. And I'm curious about labor on the equity side of things, and making sure that there are fair wages, making sure that the part-time jobs versus full-time jobs are well represented, and just in general making sure that you're contributing to good jobs. And I'm wondering about creating indicators on that level when it comes to labor practices and when it comes to contributing to good jobs, and what Walmart has done in terms of the third pillar of sustainability besides the supply chain side of things and farm workers. So those are my first two questions.
Let's talk about the labour thing first then, in terms of specifically what I think the food industry. I think the US food industry should be pretty proud of what it's achieved in terms of labour. I was in Hamilton, upstate New York, New York, a month or so ago, and was with a company which you'll probably have heard of, Chobani yogurt. I don't know if you've heard. It's a product that's doing dramatically well. And you've got a guy there who came over from Turkey a few years ago, knew how to make yogurt, and actually thought he could make yogurt better than anyone else, and put his money where his mouth was, and he bought a Kraft Philadelphia cheese factory which had closed down. He retained 2 employees. This is only 4 years ago. He's now employing 600 people. I think he's looking to expand somewhere else. He's had a dramatic impact on the employment of that community. If you go around that community, a community that was on its knees has now got beautiful new baseball fields, beautiful new parks. You can see a life in the community, and it's all come about from somebody having a great idea and making food come alive. And what's Walmart's role in that? I'm not claiming any role to that beyond when we've got great products, we can put them on the market and sell them and make them work very, very well. When you look at, as I said earlier, we won't tolerate anything outside of our ethical standards on farm labour and those kind of issues. And we know there's some issues there, and we're working hard to understand how to challenge all of those issues. The food industry is a great industry. We want to encourage people to believe in it in the food industry and really work at it. One of the things that we did in Iowa not long ago, in Ames, Iowa, we went to Ames, Iowa, and walked around with a really interesting Fred Thompson, I think his name was. Fred, no, the Dick Thompson. Dick and Sharon Thompson. I don't know if you know them. And they have got a fully. They're in the middle of the cornfields of Iowa. They use they use nothing but compost. They rotate the crops, all the practices that you would say are absolute. And his yields, and he brought out his pieces of paper. All the yields were as good as any yields anywhere else in the chain. Anywhere else that was by the big food companies, the big agriculture yields. So as you look at those things, the challenge though for that particular was he couldn't get people to come and do the work that was needed to be done, because it's hard work. Sustainable farming is hard work. I've got cousins who farm in the west of Scotland, and when you ask them about why are you using antibiotics, and they don't use antibiotics, is why are people using antibiotics, is it makes things easier. And if people aren't prepared to work really, really hard, the agricultural community will have to rely on things that make it easier for people. So we've got an enormous pride in the people that produce the food that we sell. We want to work very closely with them to make sure that there's no compromises in standards. We want them to get good wages, and we want to use our scale and efficiency to make that work. And so there's some great examples of great jobs in the food industry, but it takes hard work. And that's one of the challenges I'd put to some of the things that have been done over the last few years. Have actually just made things easier. And maybe the challenge is, how do we get people connecting with the land more and working and believing in the land more and doing the kind of things that make things better through simple hard work, not just
So really quickly, what do you think it would take for Walmart to pair the good practices when it comes to the farm workers and the people producing the food with good practices for the people who are working in Walmart and selling the food?
On Walmart's side, you mean, and working in Walmart? Well, you know, we're enormously proud of our associate base, and they've got we have got an amazing number of people who really believe in Walmart, and it's one of the things, a strong culture, and it's difficult from the outside looking into Walmart to really understand the strong culture that we have from the inside looking out. Our associates, if you'd listen to Mr. Walton right at the very start of Walmart, everything was about our associates, the ideas of our associates, look after the associates, and the associates will look after the customers. We fundamentally believe, not just in food, but across the business, that our associates are our greatest asset. And as I say, we're enormously proud of what they do and enormously proud of the contribution they make, and the company wouldn't be the size it was if those associates weren't doing a fantastic job looking after the millions of customers that we do.
Okay, and then for the audience, I'm going to take 2 questions at a time. So first 2 student questions. 1 sitting right there, and 2 in the gray. Go ahead.
So my question is for Jeff. I recently saw this documentary called Greenhorns, and it's about the rise of the young small farmer. And in an interview with 2 of these farmers, they're talking about the profits per acre that they make, comparing those with the profits per acre that a conventional large-scale farm makes. And when you take into account the costs of the mechanization and the synthetic fertilizers and everything, their profits in the small farms were dramatically higher. So what I gathered from that movie is that sustainable agriculture is not scalable. So my question is, what can we do to try to make that scalable? Is it even possible to make sustainable agriculture scalable?
Is it possible to make sustainable agriculture scalable? And before you answer that, I'm going to take another question and then allow you to answer them both. So, young lady in the back, yes. No, you, right there. Go for it. So first thing was GMO products and what's your position on GMO products. And the second thing was, as opposed to coming from the perspective of lowering costs so people can afford to buy organic food, what about the perspective of increasing wages so people can afford what food costs?
Do you want to answer the first one?
Yeah, there's sustainable. There are 3
Yeah.
questions on the
3 questions. Okay. So if I understood you correctly, the question is, can a small farm be profitable relative to agribusiness? I didn't quite understand.
Is sustainable agriculture scalable? Do you have those same sort of practices on a large-scale farm?
I don't see any reason. I mean, why not? You tell me, why not?
Well, the thing is, in the conventional large-scale farms, they're using these, large machinery and equipment that takes a considerable amount of money to maintain and to operate. Whereas they don't need that same kind of equipment on a small farm.
Just like what he was talking about.
Their costs are lower, so their profit per acre is much higher.
Agreed. That should be very scalable. If this is when we went to see Dick Thompson, we were sitting around his table drinking some iced tea with his wife. It looked like the house hadn't changed since like 1967. Vinyl floors, the whole thing, and he he basically said that, and he was more profitable on his 400 acres, I think it's something like that, than his neighbors who had thousands of acres and were subsidized by the government. He gets no subsidies. And the first thing Mr. Sinclair here asked was, how come everybody's not doing this? You're making more money. And he just said, habit. So I think it's primarily a function of worldview, habits, and people don't like to change. So I think it's about innovation, and for sure, if there's a way to do something that makes more money in an acre of ground relative to something else, it should be very scalable.
Okay, the other two questions on the table.
For GMO foods.
Labeling. What's your position there?
Well, it's a very live issue because I think it's something there's been an initiative today, I think, where somebody's been pushing the issue of labelling GMO. I think it's a complex issue, GMO, and it's interesting that it's moved. I don't know what the proportion of corn produced in the US today is GMO, but it's a pretty big proportion, 60 or so percent. So the issue of labelling it, I think we're going to have to let the customer and the government decide for us on that one. I don't think Walmart can be the definitive what should we do on this. The reality of it is all of you are eating GMO product. There's no doubt about that. You're all eating GMO product. And you know where I came from, it's been a much more heated issue in the United Kingdom than it has been in the United States. My view on the specifics of the labeling is that it ultimately will come down to the customer demanding that and the government enforcing it. And it won't be an issue of whether Walmart make that call or not. We won't make that call. And the second question was around...
The second question was about your own labor practices and this whole issue of cheap food, and it really goes to that non-virtuous circle we were talking about earlier, whether maybe the answer is to, and this goes not just, this is Walmart, but obviously it could be minimum wage across the country, raising the income of people so that they could afford more sustainable food. Is that a reasonable way to attack the same problem?
Well, I think when it comes to specifics around where we are as a business, we're very, we compare very favourably in terms of how our remuneration and our pay and benefits to our people. We're very proud of the job that they do, and they do a fantastic job. It's amazing to actually, again, work in Walmart and see the number of people who've started as hourly associates and have risen through the ranks. I can't remember the specific number, but there's an astonishing number of store managers who've come through from that position of hourly associates starting on the show. So as well as the opportunity that's presented to people is something that we're seeing come alive for millions of people across the country. So it compares well, Michael. When it comes to keeping the prices down, I think it's about driving, and this is a broader question, how do we drive efficiency across the board? And it's real efficiency that takes hard work. It's not efficiency that just takes very snap decisions and let's just cut this and cut this and cut this. It's about how do we drive our business model using scale to drive efficiency. We'll keep the price of food down. If you keep the price of food down, people can do more with their money. And that's been the success of Walmart right since 1962. People have got more with their money because they pay less, not just for food, but right across the store. And that's the business model that we think has generated lots of jobs for people, has generated lots of economic benefit for lots of people right across the country.
All right, 2 more questions. Standing up. Young man in the blue shirt back there, and then gentleman in the red. Go for it.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so considering...
Yeah,
So,
Did everyone hear that? Do you want
well, we will repeat it for the people watching. So considering the fact that part of how Walmart came to be what it is its centralized distribution system, how do you move to sustainability, either with local sourcing, or what was the last part? Okay. How could you move toward local sourcing? So that's the first question. And second question over here. So considering that we live in an economic system that's based on endless growth, is there a day when Walmart will say, we have grown enough, considering how large the company is? And I also, what I missed...
That's a great one.
Okay, and I missed actually the last part of your question, which was part of the centralized distribution system is the footprint, And so how do you deal with the footprint of the centralized distribution system?
Okay. Great questions. Let me take the first one. Walmart's success isn't about its distribution systems. Remember, Walmart was a very small company. And Walmart's success is about focusing on the customer. There's only one boss, is what we talk about. And the reason that one store became 2 stores, and 2 stores became 20 stores, and 20 stores became 200 stores, is because the customer was at the center of everything that we did. And the distribution systems, and I clearly wasn't here when that was going on, but the distribution systems that were invented were about how do you bring lower prices for those customers. The customers didn't come because of the distribution system. The customers came because they got low prices. And that's the fundamental, simple model that we got. You focus on the customer, you give them great quality products at as low a price as you possibly can, and then you invent your system around it, and you evolve your system around that. And that applies equally to the customers that are coming into the stores in the urban centers of Chicago. We'll have to figure out a way of making that work for them. It will apply equally to the customers as we go into different countries and different markets. If you put the customer at the center of what you try and do, all these other things come around behind it. And that simple model is what we do. So the reason local sourcing is so important to us is our customers want it. So if our customer wants it, we're going to have to figure out a way of doing it. And the fact that we've said we're going to get 9% of our sales in local source, customers actually would rather have Georgia peaches in Georgia than California peaches when the Georgia peaches are right. So we find a way of doing it. We've got 42 distribution centers. If we need to go direct, we'll go direct. We will find a way of giving the customer what they want to do and find the solution to give the customer what she wants to buy from us. So that to me is the crux of local sourcing and how we're going to do it. If the footprint doesn't work for it, then we'll find another footprint to make it work. Because if you put the customer at the center of what you do, then that's why when you get rewarded on that. The question on growth, I don't, it's way above my pay grade, that one, to be honest with you. Way above my pay grade. The reality of it is that Walmart will continue to grow and continue to strive to grow, and the only way we will grow is if the customer's satisfied. Nobody has to come and shop at Walmart. And that's part of what we do. We're in business to look after shareholders. We're in business to look after our customers. And we're in business to look after our associates and work within a sustainable business model. The sustainable business model isn't a contradiction to growth. We need that sustainable business model to make the growth work. And that's how I would answer that one.
And we're just about out of time. So, Jib, any final thoughts? No. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And we will see you next week.
Can I just say one word?
Oh, yes, Michael.
Thank you. Those were excellent questions. And thank you to our guests. I don't think we've solved the problem of the high cost of cheap food, but we've gone a little deeper in it. And I really appreciate your coming here tonight. And thank you.